Hello, family, friends, followers, and subscribers. Thank you each for being whatever you are and watching this video. And for the guests who have stopped in, I invite you to become a friend, a follower, and a subscriber. I was asked a question by a friend of mine who I have really enjoyed. His name is Dan Sizemore from Crestville, Oregon. And the question he asked me was about the power of the sheriff, and it was in relation to what duties the sheriff has to perform. The sheriff in most jurisdictions, excuse me, the sheriff in most jurisdictions is a state constitutionally elected official. And the state passes laws, and much the same as there's agencies to pass to enforce various federal laws and take care of the criminal action, FBI, CIA, so on and so forth, the acronym agencies. The sheriff has that responsibility at the local level in the counties for most states, and they are elected. What being elected means is that they can be removed from office by impeachment, but that's the only actual real way to do it. There's all kinds of case law, a lot of it, where sheriffs are mandated by their state legislators to do certain things. They must do this, they shall do that. The immediate has a legal meaning. But the sheriffs are underfunded, grossly underfunded, and they can't do everything they're mandated to do. Their job's the enforcement, and because they can't do that whole pile of things that they're mandated to do, they get what is called enforcement discretion. They allocate the priorities according to what they feel those priorities are. Again, all these other duties a lot of them are mandated. So the sheriff, it's not that the sheriff doesn't have to do a particular mandate. He does. But because he can't, because he doesn't have enough money for all the resources for the sheriff's office, and he's the elected official in charge of that, what he gets to do is he gets to select out of all of the mandated duties, he gets to select what he's going to do. And the legislatures of the various states can overlay that. They can actually prioritize it. But what the case law teaches us, and if you were to study that, is that the sheriff still has the discretion to ultimately make those decisions. As long as he makes those decisions in good faith, the state really can't do anything about it except seek an impeachment process. So the direct answer to Dan's question is that the sheriff gets to control the scope of his job with respect to how he goes about it under the umbrella of the mandates the legislature's passed. Now that ends my answer to Dan. But the thing for you to think about as we wrestle and we deal with these kinds of issues, and I love using Portland as an example because the mayor up there, Wheeler, and the queer governor, they got their heads so far up their ass that they think the world's a rosy brown and it should be the way they want it to be. They're caught in a dilemma. Think about the 4 months of demonstrations. I think it was 4 months. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe it was 5. But could they have taken actions? The sheriff had the option to choose. And what happens is in Oregon, and Oregon is typical of almost all the states, is they have the state police. And the state police jurisdictionally have a responsibility for the whole state, where the sheriff has a responsibility for his county. But all the legislators have allowed sheriffs in the exercise of their discretion to support other counties. So a sheriff in one county can basically do the duties of a sheriff in another county. They can act in support without special deputization. And so you got the state police over here that's run by the governor's office usually, and the head of the state police is at the whim and the will of the governor. The sheriff is at the whim and will of the people because he's elected by the people, where the state police are not. So then you have jurisdictional questions of who controls. The sheriff ultimately always controls because he is the elected enforcement official in the county for that. The state police, while they're subject to their boss, the governor, the person who elected them, ultimately the sheriff controls. And if there's a clash in jurisdictions, and sometimes the legislature will give the state police a particular role or responsibility that they won't give the sheriff. But the sheriff has the ultimate responsibility of enforcement of all laws in his county. So there's a rub and a conflict there. It goes on a lot, often. We go back to Portland, and why didn't the sheriffs up there in Multnomah County and the surrounding area, why didn't they step into the middle of that and stop it? Political hot potato, a waste of resources. Ted Wheeler and gang and your queer governor there, they want to defund the police. They're going to put the money elsewhere to protect the people. Joke, total joke. It's all part of their swamp to achieve their liberal political goals. And what they don't really understand, and anybody who's studied history does, is that their political goals as they're outlined right now ultimately will fail. The question becomes of how much can you steal from the people? And the answer is, well, you can steal everything they got, but somewhere in that there's going to be an actual revolt. And I remember, and this was in the late 60s or early 70s, I read a report, and it was about guns, and we had more guns. Oregon was one of 6 or 7 states that had more guns and more ammunition than the federal government. So, and they say, well, they're going to take the guns away. Unless they do something like they did in Czechoslovakia, they being, in this particular case, the Germans, unless they do something like happened in Czechoslovakia, they're not going to get the guns. And what they did is, they first required everybody to register the guns, and then later they went to everybody that had registered the guns and they said, show me your guns. And if you couldn't show them the gun, if you didn't have the gun or you refused to show the gun to the enforcement, then they shot you right there on the doorstep. And that's a cyclic thing. We're in that cycle, and the question is whether, as a republic, with the value system we have and the Bill of Rights, whether government will ultimately get away with that when the time comes for that. What history teaches us is that this happens every 200 to 300 years. You go through this cycle. Although sometimes it's a lot longer and sometimes it's a lot shorter. We're in that cycle. And we have young people are dumb enough with their heads so far up their ass, the world looks rosy brown to them too. And everybody wants something for nothing. Why would anybody want to become a doctor, pay the price they got to pay to become a doctor, and then after having done so, get minimum wage, have the government dictate to them, because doctors charge too much? Anyway, I ramble and roll along. So much for that. I hope it's a good week for each and every one of you. I hope you can be safe. Having had the corona twice, I'm a lot more responsible. But the joke of the masks, the current ones that we have out there, and the fact that they don't work, offends me. Shutting the business down instead of treating it responsibly for the purposes of political power offends me. The swamp and its failure, and I challenge any and all of you to look at the history on this, but Trump has done more for our nation than any president we've had in the past. And then we have this gross amount of voter fraud. I loved it when I saw the statistics and the statistical probability of the vote being the way it was. Anybody with probably an IQ of 80 or above could look at that and see the truth and the reality of what happened. And we'll have the fun of watching it all play out, and then we'll have the anguish of dealing with Biden and gang. But anyway, let's put all that aside. As we get closer to Christmas, in these trying times, for those of us who can, let's support our friends and neighbors and make this the best Christmas we can. I am truly regretful that I don't get to do Santa this year, but I'm not putting myself or other people at risk with this COVID thing going on. You all have a great week, and thank you for stopping in for a visit. Make it so.